Uh, just we'll discuss about nutrition once, then we will go to the respiration. So tell me about the alimentary canal. It is the from the mouth or the buccal cavity until the anus. It is called as the alimentary canal. Then, so saliva, which is produced by the salivary glands. Okay. Hmm. So, what it converts actually? It converts complex sugar into simple sugar. Then we have the esophagus, right? So and esophagus, which will connect between the mouth and the stomach. Tell me about the stomach. It produces HCl, mucus, and the pepsin. Pepsin, it is required for the synthesis of the proteins. Hydrochloric acid, what does it do? It kills the harmful germs of the bacteria. Mucus is present to prevent the correct from the HCl. Okay. So this is about the stomach and food. Uh, it is the one which stores the food. Correct. It is the one which stores the food. And the complete digestion, where the complete digestion will happen, it happens in the small intestine. Tell me about the small intestine, Andrita. Yesterday, what we so respiration means what? In the animals, we take in the oxygen, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out the carbon dioxide. Okay. So in this, what happens in the during this time? So when you take in the oxygen, the digested food combines with the oxygen. Okay. The digested food which is absorbed by the bloodstream, right? So that combines with the oxygen. That is like example, glucose combines with the oxygen. Then what we get? We get carbon dioxide, water plus energy. And energy is in which form it will be there? It will be the ATP molecules. So ATP, it is the form where the cells can use. ATP is the form of energy where the cells can use for its growth, and repair and its normal function, right? So that is the one energy it can be used. Then in the respiration, there are two types of respiration. In the respiration, we have two types. One is aerobic respiration. The other one is the anaerobic respiration. One is the aerobic respiration and the other one is the anaerobic respiration. Right now, two types of respiration. Two types of respiration. Aerobic respiration. Another one is the anaerobic respiration. One is the aerobic respiration. Other one is the anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration. So what happens in the aerobic respiration? Glucose plus the oxygen, we get carbon dioxide plus water plus the energy. And in anaerobic respiration, the energy is released in the absence of oxygen. Energy is released in the absence of oxygen. So difference between aerobic and anaerobic is what? Aerobic respiration, it uses the oxygen to produce the energy, whereas anaerobic respiration, it does not uses the oxygen here, right, for production of the energy. But in aerobic respiration, energy released will be much more when compared to anaerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration happens in the most of the animals, right? So human beings, all this we see the aerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration we see in the small microorganisms, yeast. In the we see the anaerobic respiration. Write down about that, then we'll continue. It is a process in which energy is released in the presence of oxygen, in the presence of oxygen. C6H12O6 plus the oxygen, we get carbon dioxide plus water plus the energy, plus the energy. So here, first glucose is converted into the glucose is carbon 6. It is converted into carbon 3 molecule by the cytoplasm. So that carbon 3 molecule we call it as the pyruvate. Okay. So it is the we call that as a pyruvate. It is a carbon 3 molecule. Then dirt combining with the oxygen, it converts, then it again combines with the pyruvate, combines with the oxygen, so we get carbon dioxide plus water plus the ATP. Okay. In cytoplasm, write down this, in cytoplasm it is converted into pyruvate, that is carbon 3 molecule. Huh? It's not coming. In the presence of oxygen, we get carbon dioxide plus water plus the energy. Next one, glucose. In the lack of oxygen, we get lactic acid plus the energy. We get lactic acid plus the energy. in the absence of oxygen, in the absence of oxygen, we get ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus the energy. Plus the energy. Huh. So first one, it is the, in all animals and human beings, we see the first one, that is the aerobic respiration. Second one is an anaerobic respiration. That is, here it is the lack of oxygen. Where do we see that? Whenever we run, yeah, muscles. Whenever we run more than what usual thing we do, then what happens? The muscles need more oxygen when compared to every time, right? See, usually we don't run. Suddenly we start running for a long time, or maybe 10 minutes or 20 minutes. What happens? Then we see the pain in the muscles, right? Why it is so? Because the legs need more oxygen, right? More oxygen, the body is not used to that, so it try to produce the energy in the lack of oxygen. There lactic acid is produced plus the energy is released. Okay, so you need more and more energy, right? So what happens? It try to produce the energy in the lack of oxygen. It is the lack of oxygen, less oxygen. Okay, so in that, lactic acid is also produced. It is also a byproduct produced. So lactic acid in the muscles creates the pain. So after some time it will be released, right? Because that lactic acid, yeah, that will be actually it comes out of that muscle. Because of that, actually the pain will be released after some time. Okay, so lactic acid is produced. Because of that, the pain will be there in the muscles. Okay, next, in microorganisms, example like yeast, what happens? The glucose is converted into pyruvate, then from there, in the absence of oxygen, it is converted into energy, where ethanol is also produced. But in this case, energy produced will be less when compared to the aerobic respiration. Okay. So whenever microorganisms are there, right, it does not require separate organs for all, right? In amoeba, we see everything is done by a single cell. Whereas as the organism becomes very complex, then what happens? Or the organs, it need different organs. It requires each different organs, specified organs for each thing. So in the human beings also, respiration, so we have the different organs. That is, the lungs is there. So we will try to study about the that. Okay, this is done. Now, lungs is required to take the oxygen from the air. Lungs is required to take the oxygen from the air, correct? Whereas when the fish and all takes the oxygen, which is in, yeah, it is a gills, which is in the dissolved form. Oxygen is present in the oxygen which is dissolved in the water, that it tries to take. Fish respire through gills, correct? How it will respire? Through gills. That is, water is passed on through to the gills. There it try to take the absorbed oxygen, which is dissolved oxygen in the water, and it again it removes out the water from the gills. Okay, so oxygen is present in abundant in the air. Okay, it is present in abundant in the air. So the dissolved oxygen in the water is less. That is why the breathing rate will be more for the aquatic animals. Okay, that is why the breathing rate will be more for the aquatic animals. Okay, see, again I repeat, the lungs is required for the taking the air from the taking the oxygen from the air, whereas gills is there whenever the aquatic animals are there, right? They have the gills. What they do, they try to take the air, or they try to take the oxygen which is dissolved in the water. Okay, the amount of oxygen dissolved in the water is less when compared to oxygen present in the air. That is why breathing rate of the aquatic animals is more. Okay, breathing rate of the aquatic animals are more because they have to take more oxygen, right? So at that time the breathing rate will be increased. And in aquarium and all, you would have seen, right? It actually oxygen is not dissolved much, so we will put the pump there, oxygen pump. But in ponds, rivers and all, what happens, it dissolves in the nature itself. With the in the ecosystem it happens, so no need to provide any extra oxygen pumps there. But in an aquarium, that does not happen, so we have to supply one oxygen pump so that oxygen will be pumped into the water, which will be dissolved, and that will be used by the fishes. Okay, so oceans, rivers, all these are the natural ecosystem where, or in natural way, it actually happens. So the oxygen will be dissolved, so it can be used by the animals. Okay. Hmm. These questions they ask, the breathing rate is more for which one, or MCQs, or the reason for that. These questions they will ask in the exam. Okay, right. Animals have lungs to take oxygen, or to oxygen which is from the air. Okay, aquatic animals aquatic animals have gills to, to observe to absorb a absorb oxygen in the from the water, to absorb oxygen from the water. The amount of dissolved oxygen the amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low is fairly low compared to compared to the amount of oxygen in air. Hence, the rate of the rate of breathing the rate of breathing in aquatic animals is faster than the it is faster than the terrestrial organisms or the animals. Okay. Next is respiration in human beings. Respiration in human beings. So first air is taken inside the body through the nostrils, correct? First air is taken into by the nostrils. In the nostrils we have the air. In the nostrils we have the hairs, tiny hairs will be there, right? So which will filter the dust, which is the first filter, we can call it as a first filter. which will try to filter the dust present in the air. And we also have the mucus, correct? So that will also try to filter the dust present in the air. Okay, first we take in the air through nostrils. So in the nostrils we have the fine hair particles that will actually try to filter the dust to, like, from going inside. Okay, and we have the mucus in the nostrils. So mucus will also try to filter the dust. Okay, it will also try to filter the dust, which is like which acts like a filter. Right on. The air is taken into the body. The air is taken into the body through the nostrils. Through the nostrils. The fine hair present filters the air. It filters the air, or it removes the dust from the air. Okay. Mucus also helps in mucus also helps in filtering the air. In filtering the air. And then it is passed on to the windpipe, correct? So then it is passed on to the windpipe. We have the rings of cartilage, right? We have the rings of cartilage which will help in, like, which will, like, whenever air is not passed through the windpipe, right, it should not collapse. If it collapses, the person dies, right? So it should not collapse. For that sake, we have the rings of cartilage. Okay, we have the rings of cartilage which helps us to, like, the windpipe will not be collapsed. Okay, whenever air is not passed through it, so for that case we have the rings of cartilage. Okay, written, done. Next, rings of cartilage. Rings of cartilage are present in the throat. They are present in the throat, throat, which helps, or which ensure that that the air passage does not collapse. Does not collapse. Okay. From there it is passed on to the lungs. Okay, from there it is passed on to the lungs, and it is in the lungs, actually it is divided into the portions, right? It is divided into the portions. So lungs, like, it is like a balloon. It is like a balloon, and exchange of gases will happen in the alveoli. The exchange of gases will happen in the alveoli of the lungs. It is having, the alveoli is having the very thin membrane. It is having a very thin membrane, so that exchange of gases happens effectively. Okay, the alveoli is having a very thin membrane, so because of that, exchange of gases happens easily. Okay, and since it is very soft, it is a membrane, right? So it is protect, the lungs is protected by the ribs. Lungs is protected by the ribs, and even the heart is protected by the ribs. Okay. So wherever the exchange of gases happens, there it will be always a very thin membrane will be there, because it has to happen easily, right? So it will be always a thin membrane. Okay. So how the exchange of gases happen? Exchange of gases happen by the diffusion process. So what is diffusion process? To lower concentration, yeah, whenever the movement will be there from the higher concentration to the lower concentration, we call it as a diffusion process. So everywhere we see the diffusion process actually. For example, if you have the milk in a vessel which is very hot, if you keep it the hot milk in a vessel, what happens if you keep it for some time? It becomes cool, correct? It comes to the room temperature maybe after 2 hours or 3 hours. Why it comes to the room temperature? Because heat is more in the vessel and less in the surrounding. So what happens? The heat will be transferred from the milk to the surroundings, that is from higher concentration to the lower concentration. So similarly here also, gaseous exchange will happen from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. So when we breathe in, what happens? Oxygen will be more. Okay, so concentration of oxygen will be more. So alveoli try to observe the oxygen inside that. Okay, so when it observes, that oxygen is passed on to the blood stream which is flowing in the alveoli. So that oxygen, it is passed on to the blood. When it is observed, it is passed on to the blood stream which is in the alveoli. From there, it is passed on to the complete body. So whenever the organism is complex in nature, only the diffusion process will be not enough to transfer that to the whole body. So we have the hemoglobin, correct? We have the hemoglobin, which is a red color pigment, and that is the one which carries the oxygen in the dissolved form to every cell of the body. That is the one which carries the oxygen to every cell of the body. So only the diffusion process will be not enough to supply the oxygen. So we need a carrier, that is the hemoglobin, which is a red color pigment. Okay, which is a red color pigment. So it absorbs or it dissolves, the oxygen will be in the dissolved form in the hemoglobin, and it is supplied to every cell of the body. And from after taking the oxygen, what happens in the cell? There will be the chemical reaction, that is glucose plus oxygen, we get carbon dioxide plus oxygen plus energy, which is in the form of ATP, which happens in the mitochondria. Whereas it is converted to pyruvate in the cytoplasm, then in mitochondria it is converted into ATP, which will be used. Okay, it will be used. So it is like alveoli, you can consider like a sac. You would have seen the sac bags, right? Like that. It will be porous in nature and it has a thin membrane. It has a very thin membrane, so exchange of gases happens easily. Okay, write down that. In the lungs, in the lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes, smaller and smaller tubes. Okay, which finally terminate in balloon-like structure. Balloon-like structure. which are called alveoli. Next, exchange of gases. Exchange of gases. Okay, exchange of gases happens in alveoli. So first, when you breathe in, what happens? Oxygen will be more. Concentration of oxygen will be more outside. So what it happens inside the lungs when we take in? So alveoli will try to absorb the oxygen and it is passed on to the bloodstream. And when deoxygenated blood is passed on to the lungs, when deoxygenated blood is passed on to the lungs, what happens? The alveoli will have more carbon dioxide, so it tries to leave out. Okay, that is passed out of the body. Exchange of gases happens in the alveoli. So when we breathe in, write down this, when we breathe in, okay, when we breathe in, we lift our ribs, okay, and flatten our diaphragm, our diaphragm, and the chest cavity increases, and the chest cavity becomes large. In this, they ask, when we breathe in, what happens? We lift our ribs, okay, flatten our diaphragm so that the chest cavity increases and we take in the oxygen easily. Right? Hmm. So, where the exchange of gases will happen? Alveoli. Then, which is the pigment which carries the oxygen? Yeah, RBC. In that, we have the hemoglobin. Ah. Then tell me about the nostrils or how it is gas will be filtered. More about the respiration, which helps in the filtering pattern. Okay. Then what is the function of rings of cartilage? Huh. Prevents from collapsing of the tube. Okay. What is aerobic respiration? Wait, one after the other tell. Then it will be like everyone can hear. Huh. To produce? Huh, correct. H2. We call it as aerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration. Little bit louder, everyone, so that it will for them also. Correct. Ethanol and correct. In the aerobic respiration. Correct. Two. 38 for aerobic respiration. Okay. And by which process there is the exchange of gases? By the diffusion process. And oxygen, hemoglobin has high affinity to oxygen, so it readily absorbs the oxygen. Okay. So and that absorbed oxygen, it is from the blood, it is passed to every cell. And also, actually, if you take carbon monoxide, you would have heard, right? Carbon monoxide. Hemoglobin has more affinity than the oxygen. Okay, carbon monoxide can be dissolved easily, even easier than oxygen. Okay, so how carbon monoxide is formed? Whenever carbon is not burnt properly or air it does not get sufficiently, usually it will happen carbon monoxide. Otherwise, it will become carbon dioxide. So, affinity towards carbon monoxide is more because it is lighter. Okay, affinity towards carbon dioxide is less when compared to carbon monoxide and oxygen. See, whenever you would have heard like someone had put the battery or a laptop and they left for even before bursting, the person had died or something, you would have heard, right? And even in geysers and all, somewhere you would have heard, right? Why? Because whenever carbon monoxide is released into the air, so if the person inhales more carbon monoxide, which is poisonous gas, so it can be easily absorbed into the body. Whenever he is exposed to the carbon monoxide, no, any person, they can easily absorb the carbon monoxide because hemoglobin easily can absorb the dissolve that carbon monoxide. So then, and it is poisonous in nature. So what happens? The person may die also if he is exposed to more carbon monoxide. So sometimes just by that gas, the person had died. As you would have heard, they have kept the laptop for whole night charging and all. But before bursting the laptop, also they had died. Something, so many things you would have heard like that. No, that is because of that carbon monoxide. That is why in the even in the emission and all they check, right? Carbon monoxide is less emission. So many things they will check within that. This is also one what they try to check because if it is not burning properly, then it may produce the carbon monoxide, which is not good. It is a poisonous in nature. Okay, and that also they ask questions like which has more affinity, hemoglobin has more affinity to what, like that they ask, like options like oxygen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, like that. Carbon monoxide is having more affinity towards carbon monoxide than even oxygen also. Okay, and carbon dioxide comes at the end when you consider like how it can attract the carbon dioxide. Okay, just write those things. First write about diffusion, then the gaseous exchange. The gaseous exchange exchange is through diffusion process. Is through diffusion process. The diffusion pressure. Next, the diffusion pressure alone cannot cannot take the oxygen to all the parts of the body. The respiratory pigment, the respiratory pigment take up oxygen take up the oxygen to all parts of the body. Hemoglobin hemoglobin has high affinity. It has high affinity for oxygen. Right, hemoglobin has high affinity for carbon monoxide for carbon monoxide, that is CO, okay, than the oxygen. Than the oxygen. Than the oxygen. Done?